Welcome everyone to this explainer. Today we're focusing on a story that has literally terrified audiences all over the world. We're diving straight into the haunting, true story folklore of Elif and Umar. And if those names sound familiar, it's because this is the exact same chilling account that inspired the absolutely terrifying Turkish horror film Dabbe 5. Now, you might know that the film is notoriously difficult to finish just because of the intense psychological dread it builds. But today, we're actually going to unpack the real folklore and the source material behind it. We're going to examine the structural breakdown of a very specific, highly localized type of terror. Okay, let's dive into this terrifying definition. Zehri Cin translates to the poison of the jinn. Now, according to the folklore, this isn't your standard Hollywood possession where an entity just violently takes over. No, it is way more insidious than that. It acts exactly like a slow-spreading poison inside the victim's body. Once this entity latches onto someone, it can literally take a lifetime to eradicate. The lore suggests it slowly, methodically hollows out the human host. And the inescapable nature of this curse means it typically only ends in one of two ways: either infinite tolerance of the torment or death. Section 1. Poison of the Jinn. To truly understand how this poison takes hold, we really have to look at the environment. Elif and Umar had an arranged marriage, and it placed them in a desolate, completely isolated desert village in Turkey. We're talking about the kind of remote landscape where your closest neighbor is miles away. If you ever needed help, it would take a very long time for anyone to reach you. Now, Umar worked as a helper at the local mosque, and because of his job's demands, he left the house super early every single morning and didn't come back until deep into the pitch-black night. This brutal schedule left his new bride, Elif, completely alone in this remote, dead-quiet house surrounded by nothing but cold, vast desert. That total silence and isolation, it was the absolute perfect recipe for creeping dread, leaving Elif entirely vulnerable. Section 2. Whispers in the Mirror. So for the first 2 or 3 days of their marriage, everything seemed perfectly fine. They were happy. But then we get the first real crack in their reality. Omar came home super late one night, totally exhausted from the mosque. But instead of finding his wife asleep in bed, he walked into the dark house and heard whispering. He found Elif standing in the pitch black, just having a full-on conversation with a mirror. When a very confused Umar asked her who she was talking to, Elif suddenly snapped out of it, kind of like she was waking up from a deep trance. She had absolutely zero memory of the conversation. Her only defense was, "I wasn't talking to anyone, I was just looking at myself." Umar, being exhausted and just wanting to sleep, kind of brushed it off. But here's the thing, the temperature in the room had suddenly plummeted. It was freezing cold, even though there were no open doors or windows anywhere. And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying duality that began to rapidly emerge. By morning, Elif was absolutely terrified. She sat Umar down and softly confessed that she felt like she was being controlled by something else. Like some outside force was taking over her body at night, and she was just a helpless passenger trapped inside. But by night, that innocent, frightened Elif completely vanished. Umar would wake up to find her missing from their bed. One night, he went outside into the freezing desert air and actually found her by the garbage bins, aggressively eating discarded raw meat. When he confronted her, she snapped back again, completely unaware of the grotesque things she was just doing. Section 3. Descent into darkness. As the days went on, Umar realized her parents had never seen this kind of behavior from her before they got married. The supernatural occurrences were becoming undeniably violent and just deeply, deeply unsettling. Just look at this rapid escalation. Night 1, whispers in the dark. Night 2, consuming raw meat by the garbage. And by night 3, Umar is violently jolted awake by the sound of shattering glass. He runs into the kitchen to find Elif just violently smashing glass plates onto the floor. But the most horrifying detail, her face was twisted into this grotesque, totally unnatural smile. She was laughing, but it wasn't a human laugh. The voice coming out of her was deep, raspy, and entirely unrecognizable. On top of that, brutal scratch marks started appearing all over her arms and legs out of nowhere. Section 4. The Exorcist's Arrival. Omar was now living in pure, unfiltered terror. The very next morning, he rushed to the mosque and confided in a colleague who immediately told him he needed a hoja, which is a traditional Turkish Islamic exorcist. Now, the progression of this exorcism is clinical and it is terrifying. As soon as the hoja stepped foot into the house, he began reciting the Ayatul Kursi, which is a powerful, protective Quranic verse. Instantly, unnatural, demonic growls echoed from the bedroom. The hoja realized right then and there that this wasn't just some ordinary entity. It was a jinn. As he confronted Elif, she started speaking in a strange, totally unknown language, using this grim, deep male voice to actively mock the Hoja's prayers. After a grueling spiritual battle, the entity seemingly exhausted the host, and Elif just collapsed, entirely unconscious on the floor. Section 5. The Phantom Pregnancy. The Haja gave Omar a grim warning. This jinn was sent by someone close to them through black magic, most likely out of intense jealousy. He warned that the entity had to be expelled entirely or Elif wouldn't survive. Now, for a brief period after that, things actually went quiet. But then, the most horrifying psychological twist of this entire story drops. Elif suddenly began exhibiting extreme pregnancy symptoms. We're talking morning sickness, very specific food cravings, and, rapidly, a visibly swollen stomach. But Umar was utterly paralyzed with confusion. Because of the sheer terror that had plagued them literally since day one, their marriage had never actually been consummated. It was biologically impossible. And when a desperate Umar took Elif to the doctors, the medical scans showed an empty womb. There was absolutely nothing there. So the crucial takeaway here is this: there was no human baby. The lore of the Zehri Cin dictates that the jinn simulates pregnancy to utilize the woman's womb. It's basically a parasitic mimicry, designed to ensure that the curse, the poison, is successfully passed down to any future generations that might be born. A group of female Hojas were urgently called to the house. They took Elif into a room as she went into a rapid, agonizing supernatural labor. Hours later, the women emerged to inform a terrified Umar that there was no child. It was just a hollow birth. A sick, twisted trick played by the entity. Section 6. A traumatic aftermath. While the female Hajas fought to stabilize Elif, Umar left the house on a desperate mission. He set out to uncover the source of the black magic, visiting literally every relative who might have harbored any ill will. And here is the heartbreaking, sinister revelation of the folklore. This nightmare wasn't random at all. Umar discovered that his own uncle had been dangerously obsessed and deeply in love with Elif for a very long time. Driven by toxic jealousy, the uncle had manipulated a traditional wedding ritual meant to ward off the evil eye. He used black magic to intentionally curse the couple and invite this jinn directly into Elif's life. The aftermath of all this is pretty grim. Umar made sure his uncle was jailed for his crimes, and the Hajiyas successfully performed a counter-ritual, effectively reversing the black magic and curing Elif physically. The demon was finally expelled. But you guys, the psychological trauma was irreversible. Omar was permanently traumatized. He was constantly terrified of the woman his wife had become in the dark. Unable to even look at each other without instantly reliving the horror, the couple permanently separated. Their marriage was completely and entirely destroyed. Which leaves us with a really haunting final thought. The folklore warns that the poison of the jinn is relentless, taking root right where isolation breeds vulnerability. If an unseen entity can completely dismantle a life, leaving the victims with only the options of death or infinite tolerance, we really have to ask, when you are all alone in the desolate darkness, how safe are you really? It's a stark, chilling warning from the lore to stay vigilant in solitary places. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and seriously, keep your lights on tonight.